Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of There's a Will. We'll be talking about the Ukraine war and the crisis that has developed around it, particularly focusing on the aid crisis and what can be done in the medical field. We'll have two people working with at high level with two of the most important NGOs in the country, and we are going to talk to Michał Czesniewski in Kyiv right now to start the program. I'll introduce also the people in the studio with me, Phil Goss and David Kaiser, and more about them in a minute. But we want to get Michał while we can. He's very kindly said he would join us from Kyiv. Michał, what's the situation there and how are you?
Hello, Will. Hello, everyone. So the situation in Kyiv is quite okay. I mean, the front line doesn't go in the city itself. It goes in the cities close to Kyiv, like Irpień, like Bucha, like Hostomel. They are on the northwest side of city, and there is a war, like artillery shelling and so on, many casualties and so on. And there is also a humanitarian disaster. I mean, in these cities, there is no electricity, there is no gas, there is no current water and so on. It is like Mariupol close to Kyiv, because it is very close to Kyiv, like, I don't know, 20 kilometers from the center. In general, we can say that we have like two directions of Russian offensive on Kyiv. Northwest and northeast. And both these offensive are right now in bad condition in Russian perspective. I mean, Ukrainians made some counterattacks in the last few days, and Russia didn't gain any new territories around Kyiv since 9th of March. So it shows that the situation is very good for Kyiv, and there is no risk that Russia will capture Kyiv or surround Kyiv in the coming weeks or even months.
You're quite confident that the Russians won't be able to surround the city, based on the last month of fighting. Yeah.
Yes, I am sure, because I try to analyze every information we have every day. So, like 2 days ago, Ukrainian soldiers they withdraw the city east of Kyiv, which is called Łukianivka. It is very important because this city was like a very powerful place for Russia. There was like a few hundred of Russian soldiers, a lot of tanks, a lot of armors, and so on. These tanks was destroyed or took by Ukrainians. Like 40 Russian soldiers were killed. Rest of them ran away and so on. And this is a big success of Ukrainian forces. It was 2 days ago. And every day, since like 2-3 days, we hear about Ukrainian counterattacks around Kyiv. So the Ukrainian army pushes the Russian troops away from Kyiv every day. So the situation is quite good, but we are talking about Kyiv. The situation is completely different in the southern part of the war. In southern Ukraine, I mean, Mariupol is the fighting are right now not just around Mariupol. They are in the center, in the central streets of Mariupol. We have fightings every day. So the situation in Kharkiv is different than in Kyiv, than in Mariupol. For example, the mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, said 2 days ago or 3 days ago that in Kyiv, like 80 big houses were destroyed. In Kharkiv, the mayor of Kharkiv said that 1,000 of big buildings in Kharkiv was destroyed. But in Mariupol, we heard that like 60-70% of the city is destroyed. So we have completely different situation in different areas of this war.
How are they able to continue fighting in Mariupol without having food, water, electricity? How did they have enough ammunition to fight? Do you have any information from inside?
Right now, there is a problem on the side of Russia because right now in the Ukrainian territory, it is like 150 from 150 to 200,000 of Russian troops. They prepared these troops and they put it to the front, Ukrainian war. But like 25% of them was eliminated, and they don't have any reserves. So Russia didn't prepare reserves, and right now they try to get some Russian soldiers from their foreign bases, like from Armenia, from Tajikistan, from Kyrgyzstan, and so on. But Russian have lack of troops. But Ukrainian in this context is much better prepared. We have a lot of people in Ukraine who wants to fight, but the problem is with very heavy weapon on the side of Ukraine. We know that NATO partners, NATO countries, they gave and they are giving still a lot of light weapons to Ukraine, like manpads, like anti-tank, anti-armor systems, but they are light systems, like portable and so on. But they are not giving Ukrainians tanks. And there is a question: what will finish first? The number of Russian troops, of the number of Ukrainian tanks?
But just to take you back, I was asking also about Mariupol and what the situation is inside, and if you have any up-to-date information.
So we know that Mariupol is besieged from 4th of March, so like more than 20 days yet. We know that like 100,000 civilian people are still in the city, so much more of people of Mariupol left. They escaped, because before the war, Mariupol was like 450,000 people. So it was like Gdańsk, like Danzig. So right now in Ukraine, we have something like besieging, attacking a Danzig. What is very important, as I said before, right now we have fighting in the central part of Mariupol. So probably Mariupol fall in coming weeks, or maybe no, in coming weeks. But what is very important, Mariupol was the biggest port of Ukraine in the Azov city. We know there was a lot of industrial areas and so on. Everything is destroyed. We know that 2/3, like 70% of Ukrainian export went through sea. Right now, every port in Ukraine is blocked because of Russian invasion, and some ports are occupied, like Berdyansk or Melitopol, and soon Mariupol. So it shows how much Russian destroyed Ukrainian economy.
We could ask questions about the strategy behind that. It doesn't appear that, it just appears the strategy is to win at any cost. If winning means killing as many people as you can and destroying their infrastructure, which doesn't seem much of a victory, but it's a very World War II way of looking at it. But we've seen it before, Grozny and Aleppo. This has become almost the cliche, and Mariupol is the next in line for that, isn't it? At this point, it's the next example of this kind of attrition, fighting.
Exactly.
Yeah. What have you seen with your own eyes? Just to give us some account of what you've seen with your own eyes that can perhaps give us give us some snapshots of the war, and then we'll let you go, because you've been talking to us for quite a while, and I'm sure it's Saturday evening and you might want to relax a little bit if you can. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
So we haven't been in Irpień, we haven't been in the front line. It's too dangerous, but we see the war in the Kyiv. Not in Kyiv, we don't have Russian soldiers, but from time to time, like a few, like 2-3 times a day, something falls on the Kyivian streets or Kyivian backyards or Kyivian building. Usually, it is not bombs. It is like part of the Russian missile, which is shot down by Ukrainian anti-rocket troops. It is like 2 or 3 such a situation per day, that some part of Russian rockets falls on the backyard of Ukrainian place area, and because of these falls, we have like explosion, and the buildings are burning, and we have some casualties. So it is like a norm for Kyiv, but we don't have bombs which are thrown by the planes. Why? Because the anti-craft systems of Kyiv works. It doesn't work in Mariupol or in Kharkov, but in Kyiv they have a lot of anti-air systems which works. It is like S-300.
Very interesting. I have not heard that account. I don't know if the other gentlemen have. I haven't heard that particular account. That's a scoop. That's interesting. And that is why we're talking to you, to get some information from on the ground. Michał, will you join us, I hope, next week? And I hope you have a good week. Yeah, we know what's going on in those villages. Don't risk your life up there. And stay alive, because we need to hear things like what you're telling us. It's very useful, because we're flying blind here at home, you know?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for your invitation. Thank you, guys. I hope you are okay. Greetings from Kyiv.
All right, Michał Chishnevsky in Kyiv reporting. Thank you, and see you next time. Right, well, that was interesting, wasn't it?
Very fascinating.
I'm here with David Kaiser and with Phil Goss, who are working with medical NGOs, doing some valuable work at the moment. I want to throw over to that. I want to throw over to that subject from this, but any comments about that interesting report from Michał?
It was factual.
Yeah.
That's the thing about it.
He was very good.
And he's there.
Yeah, he's there, and no emotion, just facts, and he's cool, isn't he? He's being cool,
good.
which is great. Yeah, it's difficult to be cool in these situations.
A tremendous amount of stress he's under, clearly, being in Kyiv at this time.
Yeah, but interesting that he says that their missiles are not falling, but parts of missiles are falling after they've been shot out of the sky.
Yes.
And I had not heard that reported, and I'm following the news as you fellows are. I mean, we had rockets on Lviv today. Was it a communications center or a fuel depot? I don't know.
I heard it was a fuel depot, but I'm not.
I also heard it was a communications center, and I haven't heard the verification yet. But whatever it was pretty close to the center, and because one of the reporters I was watching had the smoke billowing behind him. It wasn't that far away, maybe a couple of kilometers or so. So it was close in. But yeah, so maybe the war is moving, and there's a method to talking about that, because with the war moving, with more missile strikes to the west, we don't know really what to expect. Perhaps the Belarusians coming in to that, encroaching over the border there towards Lviv, or maybe a little further to the southeast, then the southeast of the west, that is. How will that affect? First of all, what's the prognosis for medical aid right now? David, why don't you start, and then we'll throw it over to Phil. We'll talk for a few more minutes, and then we'll have a break, come back, and we'll continue the subject. So there'll be plenty of time for both.
From what we've heard so far, the medical situation is okay. Both sides of the border. There's no stress, real stress, on the Ukrainian hospitals so far. No real stress here.
Yeah.
We were talking to a doctor the other night who was indicating that the GPs right now are handling the situation. The big concern is going to be psychiatric PTSD is really going to be prevalent among the refugees coming in. Another thing that hasn't really been discussed is pregnant women, particularly in the third trimester. doctors are going to see refugees in Poland, and how do you handle, you don't know the positioning of the baby, the condition of the mother, the background. It's going to put a strain somewhere. And now, you mentioned what happened today in Lviv. A week ago, I think, there was an incident outside of Lviv. It's almost like they're bracketing and positioning, for their attacks. Today, a lot of people I've seen pictures of empty grocery shelves in Lviv. I was talking to a gentleman the other day who's been there, lived there. The salary level of the Ukrainians is about 1/3 of the Polish citizens, and the medicines are more expensive if you can get them in Ukraine than they are actually in Poland right now. And then the things that are really in need right now are tourniquets, quick clotting bandages, first aid kits. There's probably going to be a big need for cots. And where do we get those? And this is what a lot of these NGOs, I'm trying to assist whenever possible. August Mission, which is from Utah. Last week, they had a doctor from their organization come in. He brought 1,400 pounds of medical supplies. The host hotel here was the Holiday Inn Centrum. Christina and her staff, and Martha and Ivona, have been very helpful in complimentary rooms, storing this. And last Tuesday, these medical supplies were delivered into, right outside, to an orphanage outside of Lviv. Now, what's happened today, it may change a lot of plans for NGOs on transporting logistics, getting supplies into Ukraine. So that's where we are. The one thing, and I think Phil can certainly address, is the bottom.
Maybe let him carry on with, do you have a question for him? Yeah.
Well, I think there's a couple of aspects to the border. First off is the reception, and second is the resettlement effort. And clearly the reception must happen first before the resettlement. And we have a few stages of that. There are 9 crossings that are currently functioning. Some others could potentially be opened up, but in any case, at the 9, I think the major crossing, which is Medyka near Przemyśl, has both road and rail and foot traffic. Most of the places which did not allow foot traffic before have opened to foot traffic, meaning a bus can come up, drop people off, they can walk across and pick up another bus to go in. What I saw at Korchowa, which is north of Medyka by 20, 30 kilometers, and then the next couple of stops north, I was up as far north as Chrebenene. There is
Chrebenene is, just give us some geography.
Chrebenene is a straight shot from Lviv to Lublin to Warsaw.
Okay.
But it also is, of course, the northernmost of the ones I saw. There are still a couple of more stops north of that. But the closer we get to the Belarusian border, the dicier it gets.
Right.
So in any case, at all of the crossings but for Medyka, it seemed to be quiet and orderly, and there was an appropriate amount of aid, meaning food and toiletries and basic hygiene supplies for people.
What about for children and ladies with children?
Yes, and sometimes strollers or other things there for children. The problem is sometimes the Ukrainian authorities, which are quite slow to process people through. And so people are waiting on the other side of the border, sometimes without adequate food, shelter, and so forth. I know as of last week, we had lost at least 3 infants to exposure.
Yeah, that's something you think about.
Yeah. And on the Polish side, it's not that it's without danger. We need a few basic things to respond to any type of disaster of this nature. We need food, shelter, clothing, and security.
What's security mean?
Personal security, the ability to rest, to de-stress, to decompress.
I see. Yeah.
So what we see are a lot of NGOs, whether it's Egyptian Red Crescent or World Central Kitchen or Polish Red Cross, providing things like food, which is great. Sometimes I think there's an overabundance of food given the demand. At Medyka, but at other places it seems to be an appropriate level of support. Nobody's going hungry. There are places with donated clothing, some used, some new, and people who may need something can feel free to pick out what they need. So that's being taken care of. Haphazard as it is, it's still there. I think we've been lucky that it's been dry, because we're only a rainstorm away from a mud bath. So the dry conditions have helped, but that won't last forever.
Right. Okay. Let's stop. We'll come back with David Kaiser and with Phil Goss, talking more about helping the medical NGOs with their experience and their experiences in doing that. David, you've been 30 years in this business, something like that, 25?
About 45, actually.
45 years in this business. Wow. Who would have thought? Not me, obviously. So please stay with us, and we'll be back after the break. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to There's a Will. In the studio with me are David Kaiser and Phil Goss, who are both working to coordinate medical aid with various NGOs. David, in the break, we were talking about something very interesting. Would you like to continue?
Well, about the doctors.
Yeah.
There are quite a number of American doctors that want to come over here. In itself, they're going to be needed, but not now. So we're trying to organize a structure of doctors who want to come, who in the best time for them to come would be to come and work and rotate every 2 weeks. There's been major concerns, whether it's from Texas, or Utah, or anywhere, about American doctors working in Poland. There's been a major concern about that. Now, in the last couple of days, American doctors have the same rights as will have the same rights as the EU doctors. We'll make it more comfortable. There's still a question of who's going to have responsibility. Ideally, it'd be good for an American doctor to work under the management of a Polish doctor who's willing to take the risk of the American doctor. However, to have a situation where the doctors just come over is not prudent right now. So we're trying to put together an organizational list of doctors and availability, their specialty, and coordinate probably with somebody in the National Health Fund who has their fingers on the ground, that knows where the need is. Then we bring the doctors over. Just to show up and go to work, there's a lot of wasted time.
You're going to fill orders rather than have people coming over and standing around.
And the same thing goes from supplies. The supplies, they're desperately needed, will be needed. How do we get them over here from the United States? The best approach is kind of like the FedEx approach, in my opinion. If we get medical supplies donated in the U.S., it goes to one central warehouse, and then from that warehouse into Poland. Medical supplies coming into Poland right now is not an issue at the border. August Mission has established 2 warehouses, one in Rzeszów and one in Warsaw.
Rzeszów, where the bulk of the Fort Bragg troops are.
But that's, from what we hear, that's pretty stretched.
It's well known. I'm not revealing any secrets.
That's pretty well stretched. As far as capacity and activity. So whether it comes in here, maybe some space available on Department of Defense airplanes coming in, or coming in just normal, maybe lot airline from Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, Fort Lauderdale, direct flights, store it and distribute it. It's not a matter of it's coming to this organization. It's a matter of getting it out to the people who need it, who are on the ground. And that's what we're...
List again of the priority of just the priority of the types of aid, medical aid.
Well, there's antibiotics.
Yeah.
There's those medicines that need to be cooled. Oncology medical supplies, tourniquets, first aid kits, quick clotting bandages, major things that we need right now. And although we've had the first wave of immigrants have not had those medical problems, there's a kind of a refuge camp up in Nadalgin here, 5,000 people. They're okay. The manager told the doctor I was with the other day that we don't need any, we're okay, we're healthy.
There's actually a camp with that many people in it?
Well, that's what he said, yes. I haven't...
Okay, because I hadn't heard there were camps.
This is at the Centrum Taka. It's a conference center.
Ah, you mean the Centrum Taka? Okay.
Yes.
I knew that was being converted into sort of a large hotel.
And so
sort of
he's happy. But now...
That's a nice facility.
But that's the first wave. We haven't had the second or the third wave. And what I understand now, that medical supplies going into the western part are pretty well, you can drive in with trucks. Another concern that people have is getting back. And there's no official paperwork that allows you to quickly come back across the border.
It's a big problem. It actually prevents me from wanting to go over. No, I don't even fear the bombs as much as I do the 12-hour waits.
Let me interject on this. Having been across the border 4 times in the course of just a few days at 4 different points, as well as being on the border many, many times over the past week or 2, I understand that the times both exiting Poland into Ukraine as well as exiting Ukraine into Poland have gotten progressively shorter because basically the people who were trying to leave by car have already gone. And so now it's just the aid going in and out. And what did need to be a special aid quick service pass is no longer necessary for the most part. Of course, that presumes no second wave or third wave.
His concern is not important.
For the moment.
Right now. But what if there's another wave? It depends on what happens.
Well, it could be, but they're not going to be in cars.
How many people have come across? They won't be in cars because the cars
3.5 million?
How many?
3.5 million?
Yeah.
But remember, the total displaced is well over 7. But there's internally displaced who have come from Kyiv or wherever to a village in western Ukraine. And then there are those who have exited Ukraine to Poland and points further beyond. That's the resettlement question. Like I said before, we have the reception and then the resettlement.
Tell us a little bit about your project, but can I, what you can, and also about the connection with the people who are going in and taking out Americans left behind in Afghanistan, which was a big deal back in the fall.
I'm working with a foundation called Save Our Allies. These are people who are working to gather funds and set up medical aid. Now, as David was mentioning, there isn't really a lot of medical aid necessary beyond regular health maintenance. Diabetics need their insulin, for example, or people need, this is not to be confused with the types of medical aid necessary on the front lines. That's a different question. But for the refugees, for the moment...
There's military aid, medical aid, and then there's refugee medical aid.
Correct.
That's your
For the moment, in Poland, refugee medical aid is, fortunately, not stretched. I think there's an oversupply of equipment, or at least disposable things, bandages and so forth. But what happens if and when we begin to receive not just refugees, but wounded? Soldiers,
fighters,
or civilians, it doesn't matter.
Wounded of any kind.
Wounded of any kind. Right now.
He was talking about tourniquets. I assume that was what that's for, right?
Right now.
That's why I was actually...
Good tourniquets, all right there.
I was asking specifically for that list.
From the front lines, it's on the best of times a 9-hour drive to Lviv. It's not the best of times. So to have people evacuated from Kyiv or elsewhere to Lviv and to Poland simply is, that's no longer an evacuation, that's a transport. They need to be stabilized on site. What happens if the math changes? We need to be prepared for that on this side of the Polish-Ukrainian border, and that's what we're working towards, is to set up triage, to set up airlift facilities, to set up mobile field hospitals, and to utilize intermodal transport options so that we could have hospital trains coming just inside the Polish border on wide gauge former Soviet tracks. Now, what's important to understand here is that Europe has a standard gauge, and then the Soviet Union, or former Soviet Union, I should say, had a wider track gauge to prevent military trains from invading. Well, that also
prevented the Russians, as we know from the Battle of Tannenberg.
Well, there's a short area.
Prevented them doing what they wanted.
Delayed holiday
There's a short area from the border to Przemysl where you have both. And so we can use intermodal from one train to the next rather than changing trucks, or to offload and do triage and then do ground transport by ambulance, by bus, by helicopter as necessary, to proper hospitals downstream. So that's a bit of what we're doing regarding the preparation for what we hope never happens. We hope all this preparation will be unnecessary.
Which begs the question, How would the situation change in order for this to become necessary? What's the
Wounded
problem?
would be no longer transported 10, 12, 15 hours from Kyiv to here, to Poland, but rather you have wounded that are only an hour away that are coming here to Poland to get more immediate, more local triage and treatment.
Well, we understand now that those people who are entered into the Polish healthcare system, hospitals, after a period of 14 days, they can be transported into other European countries. Exactly what that procedure is right now, I don't know. I don't think it's been disclosed, but how it's going to get from one hospital to your other European countries, France or Germany and so forth. But the procedure is, but it's set up, the logistics on how to transport, it's going to take some strain off the local hospitals. What I understand from supplies going in to the Lviv area, you can drive in, drop them off, and distribute them. If you go into the Kyiv area, I believe, you're going to be able to go to a hub, and you're going to offload them, and the military is going to pick them up and distribute them. And so these logistics all have to be worked out. Supplies are still going into the Kyiv area by train, from what I understand.
I heard that today. Yeah.
And so I think things are coming together. If you ask offhand, people can say there's a lot of confusion on the border. If you talk to some of the NGOs, they say the first 30 days is normal behavior. Then it starts to get organized. And I think this is where we're working on right now. The borders are becoming organized delivery. Would you agree with starting to?
Yes, I would agree with that. And
This has been a huge concern, the borders. Could please expand on that?
Again, like I said, there's one border that is the major concern, and that is the Przemyśl-Medyka crossing. And that's because I think there are a couple of reasons behind that. First off, it's the largest, it has the greatest volume of refugees coming through. It has train, it has road, it has foot. And by road, at this point, mostly it's buses. Buses are coming through, some buses drop off, people walk across. In any case, when they process through on foot and then come to another, or if they process through on a bus, they can step off, get some food as they need, and move on into town. But at the reception, there are a lot of aid organizations there. What I see is there's no coordination. And so we have an oversupply
There's
of
little
aid.
coordination. There
No
must be some.
coordination.
There's none at all.
None.
So how does that work in practice? Paint a picture for us. I mean, I've been there too, but you do.
It seems to be a bit more like going to a music festival, and that's a problem. Because
selling
we have
T-shirts,
people who mean well, who are giving food, preparing and giving out food, clothing, baby strollers, basic minor medical services. And that seems to be working well, but there seem to be too many volunteers down doing a little virtue signaling, perhaps. And I understand the idea that they want to welcome people smiling and joyous, but it comes to a point where you have somebody dressed as Wonder Woman or Superman trying to cheer up children that have been on the most harrowing journey of their lives. And it belittles the process, and it belittles the experience. And I think
so more dignity in the process. And by organizing it, you give more dignity, isn't that right?
Also, there are also some, there's a religious organization, the Jehovah's Witnesses, who are down with their signs saying jw.org. They are in the way. If they're not helping, they're hurting. It doesn't matter whether it's this organization or that organization. Anybody who's down there who is not directly providing aid is in the way. And indeed,
you're not supposed to be there advertising.
Correct. And indeed, I think that many of the aid tents have too many volunteers, given the footprint and given the amount of aid that they're intending to render. So I think there needs to be a multi-step verification. We need to know each organization who is there, doing what, why are they there, who is on their roster. They need to have a schedule to know how many people are working, how many days, and to have limits. So if you have a tent that needs 3 people to staff it, you don't have 10 people there. Those 7 people are in the way. If you have, but by the same token, if you have a tent, you need to have people staffing it and not leave it empty. Also, these are people who need to be vetted and clearly identified by their organizations with some type of uniform or hat or vest or something.
Would you jump in there?
I believe I totally agree with this. There's big news about child trafficking on the border, and every car that comes through probably should be photographed, license plate, and trace it back to the owner. You know, anybody that wants to adopt children is being vetted. And so we don't necessarily think about that, but it's there. As far as trucks taking goods in, so far I haven't heard.
It's very important. This is a very. That's why I wanted to expand on this. It's an incredibly important point. But having investigated the sex trafficking trade 20 years ago now, this is something that's always very close.
Well, let me get to my second half of that. First off, the organizations need to identify how many people, and the people need to be in some type of easily identifiable uniform or some type of badging that identifies them with the tent. Secondly, all volunteers must be vetted by some Polish organization, be it Red Cross, police, I don't know who, but there needs to be somebody in charge.
Are you saying they aren't doing this?
Yes.
Are they doing
or they haven't been doing it.
Hit and miss, maybe.
Miss, mostly.
Mostly miss.
And the problem is we don't know who's there. We don't know what their intentions are. Most people are of good intent, but it needs to be
overwhelming
coordinated.
amount.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, also the question of the staging area. You've got people putting their things out on the sidewalk, creating a barrier to people getting through.
Where's that?
At Medica.
At the actual crossing point where they're
to,
walking out.
Right. They need to, in my opinion.
They've got to do this walk from the border, and they come out, and then they're in Poland.
And then the people with the aid tents are pushing their, sometimes
blocking
a sign out that's in the middle of the sidewalk. Well, I'm sorry, you're in the way. But there doesn't seem to be anybody in charge maintaining order, maintaining regulations, maintaining anything. And that, it has the potential to create a greater and greater problem if the numbers increase. Right now, the numbers are such that it doesn't matter.
But there have been so many. Do you think there could be more? Could there be a case? What would be the case where there would be another influx of the same, of another 2 million, say?
Well, we have an uptick in Lviv. We're going to have it.
So if
I would think we would.
When you say uptick, you mean
more enemy activity.
More enemy activity, firing missiles.
There are two answers.
Jets.
Chemical,
bombs,
tactical nuclear.
Chemical or tactical nuclear, and we're back to.
No, we're not going to have any refugees coming through if we have that.
When people say chemical, I know they're talking about tactical nuclear. That's really what we're afraid of, even more than the chemical, because it seems more likely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If that were to happen, if something bigger were to happen, that seems more likely.
At the point, moving beyond the.
I don't know. I don't want to encourage that we are being sensational here. It's just something that has to be faced.
Moving beyond the reception point.
You're a veteran of Vietnam. Yeah. You're a captain in Special Forces, and so you know a thing or two about combat.
When we move, though, beyond the reception, beyond the initial food and supplies and things, there are official buses run by the fire department or the police or whomever that are taking people to the resettlement location in Przemyśl at the old Tesco site. Now, this particular site, in contrast to the one at Korczowa, I think is chaotic, mostly because it's in a city and lots of people have access to that. That's a problem.
Medica is more organized. I've been in both too. Medica, actually, they have a school that was converted, or a gymnasium converted into a place.
Well, that is for the UNHCR, but the Medica village, that's just logistical support for the effort at the border. The refugees themselves are taken to Przemyśl, to the old Tesco site, where there is, again, a problem of lack of clarity, lack of organization, lack of transparency. People are tired, confused, and they need what? Food, shelter, clothing, and security. Plenty of food, maybe even too much food. Shelter, it's adequate. It keeps the rain off. Fortunately, there hasn't been rain. It keeps people warm, but it doesn't provide security, because I know there is a large privacy, and there's a problem of intra-refugee theft happening.
Of course.
So
these things are bound to happen when you have crowds on top of each other.
There's adequate medical, there's adequate pharmacy, but Where are people going downstream? Inadequate or just confusing or not transparent means to find people rides to where they can go, need to go. So the resettlement issue, again, remains uncoordinated. The first week and a half to human trafficking, we lost over 300 people that we know.
How do you know that?
Directly from the Red Cross, Polish Red Cross. And that is organ trafficking, human trafficking, prostitution, baby snatching, 300, 400, we're not really sure how much. It's been, people have been warned, and there are now signs up. I saw them putting up those signs last week. The signs in the Ukrainian language that says, travel in groups of 2 or 3, always tell somebody else whom you're traveling with and where you are going, send a photo of the person's ID or their license plate or something, and then check in downstream and tell people, yes, I've arrived safely, or whatever the situation is.
Well, when we took people from, may I give a personal, when we took people from the refugee center in Medica, we volunteered that information. They also were happy to take it. They were happy for us to take some people with us to Warsaw. We were also doing a story there. And I think my first inclination was we have to volunteer this information because they don't know who we are. I mean, ostensibly, they seem to know who we are. We seem to be who we are, but they don't know, right?
An old friend of mine just drove down privately from Bydgoszcz to Medica just to pick people up and take them back to Bydgoszcz, privately. Acting in good faith. But what if it's somebody else acting in bad faith?
Yeah, no, but I just want to say David, do you want to jump in there?
Well, I agree. And you know, we were talking tonight briefly about I got hacked on my Facebook page. I think people are provoking, and we don't know what for. And we cannot assume that everybody is friendly.
Well, it's funny because you got hacked on your Facebook page, and then I accepted it to see what would happen. And then somebody was writing back to me, but they had no profile. They were not listed even on Messenger. They just hacked in. They said, "Oh, hi, how are you this evening?" And I went, "That's not David. David doesn't talk to me that way. There's no way." So I immediately cashiered them and got in touch with you.
But I think we have to, we have incursions coming back into Poland from the other European countries too.
I think it's important also to note that just because in Poland we're not on the border in most places, that doesn't mean we're necessarily safe from the prying eyes of the Russian intelligence services.
No, of course not. And even doing a show like this, I mean, anybody is. This would be considered anti-Russian propaganda.
We know that they are monitoring people's telephones who are in hotels in Krakow and many other places.
How do you know that?
I'm not at liberty to say.
But you know that they are monitoring the telephones when you're in the hotel, or
they will find the telephone and try to tag it, and then they'll check your location history and your phone history and so forth. There are ways to hack telephones. Nothing on your telephone is safe.
Yeah, good point. Good point. People need to remember that. Anybody who's working who's working in aid or in journalism needs to be careful about their contacts and verifying who they're dealing with.
People want to come. Important. A lot of people want to come. I've gotten calls from former Navy SEALs who want to come. Of course, we can't encourage them to come.
What would the SEALs be doing?
Well, there's going to be a need for security.
Yeah, and some of them are very good at medics too.
Yes, and they're quite. But these are things that are coming from not organized delivery to me. Somehow they get my name and I contribute to this organization, and they contribute to that organization, and they follow up with me and see that I'm real. But I think that we've got a lot of people that want to come, but they've got to come orderly. We've got to set the groundwork for them to come in. The NGOs have got to, first of all, vet them, make sure that they're there. We cannot really openly discuss where everybody's going. And I think that security is going to be a big thing.
So it's not just security. This is dovetailed nicely as we're coming close to the end of the program for this week. But so security means one thing for refugees, which is giving them privacy and protecting their dignity, and it means something quite and different for people working in aid, which, is considered anti-Russian just as weapons are,
Well,
and from what Mr. Putin's been saying. Yeah.
Well, we've got lots of way to go, assuming that the first 30 days is basically normal activity. People are identifying this and starting to want to coordinate. But we've got to have accurate information. This presentation tonight from Kyiv was the most accurate presentation I've seen.
He was super. That was Michał Szyszniewski, who's one of our correspondents. I want to thank David Kaiser and Phil Goss, who are doing wonderful work. I've been following both of you for the entire war, and it's a great pleasure to know you and to know what you're doing.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
One closing point, and further to
we're running
David's
down out of time.
Is that I have people calling and asking me all the time, I want to come and volunteer and help, and they want to get on an airplane and come here, and I say, please don't. Figure it out and get your assignment from some accepted international organization, and don't just show up here expecting everyone to go, yes, here you are, thanks. You're not the savior, you're part of the problem if you're not a part of the solution.
Very good. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. I want to thank David Kaiser once again, and I want to thank Phil Goss, who are doing great things with medical aid and organizing it, and have given us some very important pointers about what we need to be looking at in terms of the physical aid and in terms of the organization of aid. So thank you for watching, and I'll just say you're looking good.